welcome. Welcome everybody. How are you doing today? It's very nice to have you here. It's always nice to have a little time together. And I wanted to speak today a little bit about what it is that I mean when I say freedom, and when I say freedom, the true independence of the past. We also have a little 2-week program coming up with the title, and I'm going to be speaking in it more about how growing of our capacity to be here and how learning about true yes and no, our true yes and no, how that brings us peace and fulfillment. Freedom is our birthright. That is why we are here, and that is the true purpose of this life. And sometimes, we forget about that, right? We get lost in the happenings, whatever is happening right now, and we forget that we are here really because we have this opportunity to know who we are and also to live in that recognition. So our journey, begins, and it's hard to put it in a linear way, but it begins with the desire for freedom. It begins with the direct experience of presence. And when I say direct, I mean not through the senses, not through the mind. It begins with that recognition, wow, there's something else here, there's something different. And eventually we want more of that. And at first our attention would go back and forth between knowing presence and back into the sense of identity and knowing presence, until at some point, there's this shift that we call awakening. And in that shift, our sense of identity shifts. It moves from identifying yourself as this body to knowing yourself as presence. However, as many of you know already, even that shift, which in the beginning looks like, wow, this is the goal, awakening, wow, this is the thing, right? And eventually we recognize this is just a first step into reality, right? Because awakening doesn't necessarily mean the end of past or the end of conditioning. Right? So when we speak about freedom, and sometimes we have this preconceived idea already of what freedom is, or what is it going to look like, because we read about it, or we heard about it in some way, or we just pick it up from the collective, the spiritual collective, like what is it going to be like? And sometimes we may imagine that freedom means nothing arises here anymore, nothing is going on, it's just all bliss, and everything just, flows in a certain way, which really, honestly, is so much deeper than that. Bliss is also a state that arises in presence, and of course, things always are taken care of, not in the way the mind and the body-mind wants, right? But things really are always taken care of. So there is this imagination that we may have, right? And then there's the reality, and the reality of embodiment or freedom is in a moment when past arises, where is our attention, right? Because we can have moments of presence and silence and stillness, and then we are in life. And for me, freedom is very functional, It means a true independence of the past or from the past. It means in a moment when past is present, where is our attention? Can we really recognize past for what it is? Can we really say, wow, past is present? Do we have the capacity and the ability in the nervous system, in the body-mind, to allow for the past to be present here? To go through whatever, to move through, the nervous system and do whatever is needed until it comes back to rest, right? Because that moment of rest is what I call freedom. And also, do we have enough strength in presence or capacity to be here, to wait here, right? Once the past moves through and it does whatever it does and whatever the experience it is that needs to happen, and it comes down and it comes to rest, do we have the strength to really wait here and to see what arises from here? See? Because this is, you know, what I call the true independence from the past, when the action is not connected to the past experience, when the action is not a continuation of the past, when the action that arises in a moment is really a true movement, right, in presence, a true movement in presence, that either, you know, there's nothing to do, because when I say movement, sometimes we think, you know, it has to move in a certain way. But when I say movement, I mean either nothing arises, right, or there is a movement, but that movement is independent of the past, you see. That movement is what I also call freedom. So in our little program, I'm going to be speaking more about that. I'm going to be speaking also showing you and helping you how we can grow the capacity to be here. Because that piece that is so important, you know, like, yes, we might have the desire to be here. We might even want to be here. We might, you know, even recognize the past when it arises. But do we have the capacity in a moment to really let it be, right? Let it be here, right? Capacity in the nervous system, right? Capacity in the body and mind. You know, a willingness to really let it be here. Right? And then when it subsides again, you know, when the movement arises in presence, there's so often so much conditioning in the nervous system, you know, in the body and mind around what's yes and what's no, right? This is our past, and I'm not going to go into details with it right now, but, you know, it sounds so simple. Yes means yes and no means no, but you know yourself that in your experience oftentimes it's not as simple at all. So when the movement of presence arises and it comes into the nervous system and the body and mind, there is conditioning of the past, right? No doesn't mean no, or it's overridden in some way, or yes doesn't necessarily mean yes, or it's overridden in some way, right? You know, very important, regaining of that resilience, regaining of that capacity, regaining of the true, you know, embodied, present moment, right, in which we know, you know, we know the difference between past and present. And also we can really move freely with the movement, independent movement, as it arises here. So I want to enjoy, I want to invite, of course, enjoy is always, I always enjoy, right? But I want to invite you to come and listen, you know, to me speak about this. And also I want to invite you most of all, you know, to your own commitment to presence, right? And to your own discovery of freedom. It's an always present invitation.